Hi, my name is Scott Hipsher. I'm a member here at Shepherd's Heart Fellowship, and for those of you that don't know me, I am a police officer. Today I'm going to be talking to you about instances where God has shown up during my day-to-day duties as a law enforcement officer. Looking back in hindsight, I can see examples where God has worked through me and around me in different situations. We'll call them orchestrated moments, I guess. A good example, there was a time when I was on State Road 2, the western side of St. Joe County. I was assisting a stranded motorist that was on the inside shoulder of the westbound lanes. There was another police officer that was ahead of me that was also helping out with that situation. And there was a vehicle that was traveling in the opposite direction that seemed to be swerving all over the road. And the vehicle slowed down really close to our location, and as it passed by, I was able to look over at the driver, and I could see that it was an elderly female driver that seemed to have the appearance that she was very ill. Something was not right with her. So I immediately conducted a U-turn and got behind her vehicle, and then just noticed that she was just all over the road. So I blocked off both lanes going eastbound to prevent traffic from trying to go around her. It was impossible to tell what she was going to do next. We went maybe a quarter of a mile, and all of a sudden she started to drive into the median. So I followed her with my emergency lights on and siren activated, and let my dispatch know what was happening, that I was not in pursuit, but that there was a vehicle that likely had an ill driver or a medical issue going on that I was trying to get stopped. Anyway, we started to go into the opposite side of the road toward the oncoming traffic, and I stayed behind her with my lights to try to get traffic over as far as possible so that she wouldn't go head on with anybody. And then she drove back into the median, and I just basically kept following. Wherever she would go, I would go to try to just stay with her so that everybody would be cognizant of the situation. When I finally had a chance to do so, I got around her vehicle and blocked it with my patrol car and just basically parked it almost perpendicular to her vehicle so that if she needed to, she would just run into my car and it would bring her to a stop. Luckily, she did not run into me, but she did come to a stop right at the side of my vehicle. We were then able to get out and assist her and get her the medical attention that she needed, and it turned out that she was having complications with diabetes and her blood sugar was extremely low. She had no idea where she was. Turned out that her husband had been looking for her for hours and wasn't sure where she was either. So it was an interesting moment where, had we not been where we were, she might have gone into oncoming traffic. A horrible crash could have occurred. So I saw where God was using me in that moment. Another example, on the Indiana toll road over by the Ohio state line, I pulled over a vehicle for a traffic infraction. The driver was an elderly male. He seemed very confused. As I ran his information, it turned out that he was listed in the system as missing endangered adult. He had been missing from the state of Pennsylvania for a couple of days. He had Alzheimer's, and I think he was trying to drive from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia and somehow ended up going west and had no idea what he was doing and just continued traveling through states. And his family was looking all over for him. So we were able to get him back reunited with his family, and I could see the situation right there where God had worked in that moment to get him the aid that he needed. Another example, this was a few years back. I was working the night shift on the toll road, and I came upon a vehicle in the westbound lanes. It was parked on the shoulder with no four-way flashers on or anything. So I pulled up behind it just to see what was going on and see if there was any occupants inside the vehicle, because it looked like it might have been abandoned because the lights were off. As I approached the vehicle, I observed there was a male sitting in the driver's seat. When he rolled down his window, I noticed that he was crying hysterically and was bawling, and we had a conversation, and it turned out he informed me his intention was to commit suicide. Just moments after I had arrived, his plan was to open the door and run out into traffic and get struck, and that he had just sent messages to his family to tell them goodbye. At that moment, obviously, I took him into protective custody just for his own safety, and then was able to transport him to a hospital where he was able to get 72-hour voluntary committal and then get reunited with his family. But that was another example where just the timing was perfect. I could have easily passed by that vehicle and just assumed that it was an abandoned vehicle, and we could have had a catastrophe possibly. So I believe God led me to that situation. Another time I had a female that was stranded in her vehicle in extreme cold temperatures. She had no cell phone with her, no gas, no source of heat, and she was just crying hysterically. She didn't know what to do. She had no way of getting help, and it was kind of in the middle of a snowstorm, so it wasn't like she could just get out and flag down traffic or anything like that. So the way in in which I just happened to end up in that area. I think I was called to another call in that area and could not locate the vehicle. The vehicle had already left, so that was the only reason I was in that area, and then just happened to stumble upon her vehicle out in the middle of nowhere. I've had situations happen similar to that in snowstorms where people have been stranded with maybe a flat tire or whatever the case may be, but they have no source of getting help because either their phone is dead or they don't have it with them or their vehicle is not powering. Dangerous situations, obviously, but God's directed me to these people, and I can see him working through that. There was another instance back in 2020, I believe it was in December, myself and 3 other shift partners of mine at the very end of our shift had to go to a call at the Notre Dame toll plaza. The situation was very emergent, so we were coming from great distances to get there. Normally at the end of our shift, we all would have exited at different exits all throughout the interstate to go southbound toward our homes, whether that be in St. Joe County, Elkhart County, Kosciuszko County. We lived all over the place. But we all ended up at this one scene that turned out to be a false alarm. So when we left that scene, we all decided we're just going to travel through downtown South Bend and then get on the bypass from there to go to our homes. So as we were traveling down the downtown area, a shots fired call came out. It sounded like it was possibly a drive-by shooting. Within a couple of miles, we had a vehicle that crossed into our path in a busy intersection where we had a green light. It had a red light, but it flew through the intersection and then lost control and spun out. So we went to go assist this individual and figure out what was going on. And this guy gets out of the vehicle, and he was a gunshot victim, and he's screaming to us, you got to help me. I've been shot, and he's bleeding out, standing in the street, and we're able to, at that moment, the 4 of us assist him, try to take on life-saving measures, while at the time he had exited his vehicle while it was still in gear. And so his vehicle is now going down the roadway, Michigan Street, toward a traffic light that was red, and there's cross traffic. While my partners are tending to him, I take off, and on foot, I'm sprinting as fast as I can to try to catch up to this vehicle while it's still rolling. I was able to get into the driver door and be able to step on the brake just before it got over a hill crest where it would have gone into that intersection. So I was able to get that vehicle stopped. They were able to render aid, and all of us were at that scene at exactly the moment that we needed to be there for that to happen. Like I said, had we not had that false alarm previously that directed us to that area of the county or of the city, period, we would have never been in that area, and it's hard to say what could have transpired. So that was another example where I feel like God led us all into that spot to be there in that moment. And then lastly, just recently, I want to say this was between Thanksgiving and Christmas this year, I came upon a stranded motorist on State Road 2. I had no reason to be out in the area that I was. The only reason I went out that way was to check on an abandoned vehicle that a unit had previously tagged several days before, and I was just wanting to make sure that it had been removed. So I went out that way, several miles out of the way, just to go check on that. And when I got out there, on the opposite side of the road, there was this minivan parked with no lights on or anything. Went over to check and see if it was abandoned, and it was a female that was sitting inside this van. And it looked like, just by the appearance of the inside, that she was actually living inside of that van. So as I talked to her, she was crying. She was a little bit distraught. She said that she had been stranded for several hours in that spot, that she did not have a cell phone. She did not have any way of communicating with anybody, that she had no food. She had not eaten in days. Her vehicle had run out of gas and also had some kind of electrical issue. So I believe the battery was possibly bad, or the alternator. So she had no way of having heat, no way of eating, no way of getting communication. So I was able to help her in that moment. I got some flares out, set it out so that she wouldn't get struck while sitting out there, but then also was close enough to New Carlisle that I told her I'll go get a gas can and get you some gas. Obviously it would only be 1 gallon at a time because that's all the larger size can that I had, but I could get her a gallon of gas and maybe get her some food. So I went into town and then went back. She asked if there was any way that we could find a way to get her towed, but she had no money. I happened to know somebody that had a trailer. They were close to the area from the LaPorte County area, and they came out with a trailer, but it was going to take them a couple hours to ascertain all of the equipment that they needed to be able to do what they needed to do. And I knew that there was no way she could sit out there with only a gallon of gas. However, she wanted to stay with her vehicle because it was really her home. So I told her, over the next couple of hours, I'm going to just keep making trips. and get more gas and get her more food and get more groceries. And just, I said, I can only fit so much in my car, but, until somebody gets here, I'll just keep making these round trips, because it was only about a 10-minute drive each direction. So I just kept, over the next 2 hours, just kept making round after round, getting her gas, getting her more food, getting her more groceries to stock up in her vehicle. And then finally the trailer came and they were able to get her off the road. And she was extremely grateful for that, obviously, but it was a teaching moment for me, because, like I said, I had not expected any kind of a situation like that to unfold, and it felt like God put me in that moment, in that situation, in that place at that time for that reason. It was nice to be used in that manner. With that being said, I hope these stories that I've shared today encourage you to step back and take a look at how God is orchestrating moments in your own life. Next week, we'll talk about situations in which God has used me to be a source of comfort in dire situations. So thank you for joining, and I hope you have a great day.